Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets, how to increase your market business success while providing people with fresh food. Farmers markets are essential. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer or food maker selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast. This week, our guest is Stefanie Stauffer, farmers market manager at the year-round Ann Arbor, Michigan Farmers Market, where farmers and vendors have been bringing fresh produce, farm products, prepared foods, and artisan items to their community for 102 years.
Wow. That's a long time.
That's a long time.
Probably not the same farmers and vendors for 102 years.
You never know. They're eating fresh produce. They're living a long time.
There you go.
You never know. Well, I'm one of your hosts, Bridget Myers. I'm a longtime farmers market manager, Vendor 101 co-teacher, and education coordinator at Farmers Market Pros.
And I'm Kat Fields-White, Director of San Diego Markets, still an active farmers market manager and consultant, founder of Farmers Market Pros, and host of Intense, the Farmers Market Conference, and the Farmers Market Pros community.
And I'm Justine Marzoni-Mead, Tent Talk producer, marketing director for Farmers Market Pros, and logistics coordinator for Intense, the Farmers Market Conference. Coming right up.
Coming up faster than you would ever believe.
Coming right for us.
Headed your way.
We've got that timer up on the website, and it's kind of scary seeing those days count down. But we'll be seeing you in March.
Very excited.
7th, 8th, and 9th in San Diego.
That's
Not
right.
a bad place to be in March for some of you out there. Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is supported by MarketLink, helping farmers markets help consumers by providing the technology, equipment, and support services to accept SNAP and other electronic payments at markets. To get the help you need to help your community with nutrition incentives, click the MarketLink logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Welcome back to Tent Talk. Today we're talking with Stefanie Stauffer, who became the market manager for the Ann Arbor Farmers Market in Michigan in mid-2020. Before that, Stefanie did her PhD dissertation on sustainable agriculture and had experience in local food movements as a farmer, educator, farmers market vendor, and seed keeper. In addition to her market work, she teaches sociology of race and ethnic relations at a local community college with an emphasis on food sovereignty and environmental justice movements. Welcome to Tent Talk, Stefanie.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
We're so excited to talk to you with lots of questions.
With all that, she still has time to podcast with us.
Oh, I mean,
You sound like a busy woman.
yes. I'm
Got
telling
a lot
you,
going on.
if you need something
good.
done, just ask a busy lady.
That's right.
So we're happy to have you with us. If you want to just jump in and kind of tell us about your personal and professional background.
Yeah, so I've been involved in the local food world, as you mentioned, since about 2007, 2008, way back when I was on your side of the world, and I was studying at UC Santa Barbara, where I got my PhD in sociology, and my project was about local food movements and urban agriculture in Michigan and California, and sort of what did it take to have local municipalities support things like farmers markets, urban gardening, backyard gardens, front yard gardens, all that fun stuff. So that's kind of how I got involved in that way, and then through the confluence of events, that research turned me into a vendor myself. Being at farmers markets, I was like, hey, I just don't want to observe anymore. Let me get into the mix. So I started growing primarily heirloom tomatoes and peppers. And I used to make hot sauce for that. And, so I've got a lot of different angles that I have interest in with farmers markets. And about 5 years ago, I started teaching sociology class, the one that you mentioned, at Washtenaw Community College here in Ann Arbor. And, I really like to bring in that discussion about food and farming. And coincidentally, that's our topic for this week that we've been talking about. And it's always fun to say, hey, this food access, you can actually use your EBT SNAP card at the markets and, connecting all the dots together somehow. But
That's
I love
great.
everything food related.
You were a vendor at the Ypsilanti market, is that right?
Yep. I've been doing that since about 2010.
Was that the market where Amanda was both the mayor and the farmers market manager for a while?
Yes, well, she ran Growing Hope, which was the nonprofit that ran the farmers market. So I don't know if she was ever physically the market manager herself, but definitely involved in the existence of that market.
Yeah, I always thought that was interesting that the mayor herself was.
Yes.
It's the same skill set,
Yeah.
Pretty much.
running a city, running a farmer's market, same kind of.
Kat, you could be mayor for sure.
Yeah.
You kind of are, secretly.
kind of
right.
are the unofficial mayor. So you started working at the Ann Arbor Farmers Market just after COVID-19 ramped up. Very exciting time. Yeah, so it can only get better from that. How did that go? And what kind of accommodations did your market make during pandemic protocols? And how's that going now?
Yeah, so, obviously a very strange time to start any job, but especially in a market where, we're a year-round market, but we had actually closed for about 6 weeks right from the beginning of March until right about when I started. I think that they had opened it back up maybe a week before I had started. So of course the challenge, but the upside of that was that we got to change some of the procedures and things that maybe for a little while some folks had wanted to change but didn't have the capacity to do so. So, that's sort of a strange silver lining, is it enabled us to try some different procedures. So in the very beginning, we had, of course, required spacing between stalls, and there was a mask requirement at the beginning as well for all vendors. And we had, one-way traffic going through the area where we had directional tape and signs. And we were actually really fortunate because we are run by the City of Ann Arbor Parks Department. So there was a lot of extra staff that, their facilities that they usually worked at were not open. So we were able to borrow a lot of them and help us with sort of, re-educating customers about the new procedures. In terms of tokens, people used to be able to come straight into our office, but obviously it's an indoor space. We didn't want that to happen. So we sort of created almost like a drive-through or walk-up window now for tokens. That is something that has been a little bit different. And we've eased away from some of these things. We no longer require masks. There is no longer one-way directives or signs of that. So, we've sort of eased in little by little back to, I don't know if normalcy is the right word there, because it's still obviously the pandemic times. But we pretty much just had to pivot, and our goal was to stay open, and we were able to do that. And we've been open since we closed early pandemic.
That's awesome. I mean, that's kind of, and all those silver linings and everything, and just being able to stay open. I feel like that's just the conversations we've been having with market managers across the country. That's just been our, big thing and goal, and keep chugging along. Are you guys still offering pre-order and curbside pickup now?
We still are. It's not as popular as it was in the beginning. Partly that is because, unlike the Ipsy market, for example, that does sort of pack all the boxes together and aggregates the orders themselves and people pick it up that way, we have a really small indoor space. So we don't have the capacity to be the one packing it. So we've left it up to all of our vendors. So if they wanted to do pre-orders with people can order direct with them, and then, give it to us, and then we'll help facilitate the drop off. But other than that, we're not really that involved. But as we're going into the colder time, we are transitioning away. We had a couple vendors that were delivering some of their CSAs through the curbside, but that, it's kind of concluded in the last few weeks. So we'll definitely see what the future holds. If people want to keep curbside going, if there is customer interest, we'll keep it going. But for right now, it's much, much less popular than it was in the beginning.
I saw a picture of really incredible hand wash and sanitation stations that I think your parks department created for you. Do you get to keep those?
Yeah. I mean,
Awesome.
They're just sort of in winter storage right now because we don't want them to freeze. But the last one just got removed maybe, a week or two ago. So those are still around. Yes, that's another benefit of having a fantastic parks department that we're part of. We can say, hey, can you fabricate this thing on the fly for us? And they were able to do so. So
how handy. And just having all the Parks Department staff, that sounds like exactly
huge.
The kind of staff that we all needed at our markets during that time when we were directing people. So what a great thing to have at your fingertips.
We are so thankful.
Yeah. So what are your responsibilities now? What is your role there at the market? What are you in charge of there?
Yeah, so we have me as the market manager, and then we have 2 auxiliary staffs. We have a assistant manager who also does a lot of the community outreach, and then we have another assistant manager that helps with that. We had been short-staffed, I feel like the rest of the world, until most recently. We just had a new assistant manager, community outreach coordinator come on within the last couple of weeks, so we're ecstatic to not be short-staffed anymore. But my role, I do everything from, vendor recruitment to day-to-day stall placement to running tokens for credit card or Snap, from cleaning the market and coordinating repairs that need to happen, so pretty much anything and everything is what I would describe it as most market managers can probably relate to. If it needs to be done, we're the ones doing it.
Our job is weird.
Yeah.
We could be the mayor.
Yes.
We could be the mayor.
Exactly.
Totally.
Pretty much are the mayor.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The mayor of Market Town.
Yes.
I love that. Cool. Well, part of the reason why we wanted to talk to you, for many reasons, and we'll get more and more into them, but is that the Ann Arbor Farmers Market has such a long history. 102 years is really impressive. So I know you are a researcher and a sociologist. So do you know, is there any kind of like history to the market or origin story that you can fill in our listeners on?
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. So for the 100th birthday 2 years ago, my predecessor and the Ann Arbor District Library partnered to do sort of a history exhibit about the market. So when I started, I got to see all these really cool archival photos. And maybe I can actually share with you one of our website links. So people listening in might be able to see those. But originally, there was a newspaper clipping that they unearthed from the 1880s of saying, like, we really want a public market in our city. And it took a little while, from 1880, whatever, until 1919 when the market finally opened. But that was the opening date of the market. And we used to be just sort of an open air kind of truck farm situation where people would pull up to the sidewalk right next to the courthouse. And they had their wares right there for people walking by. No tents then. It was just fair weather only, I'm assuming, or maybe not. But then in 1938, the city of Ann Arbor was able to secure some funding through the WPA program, of course, famous in the Great Depression, by putting folks back to work. So our market pavilion that we are using today was built between 1938 and 1941 as part of the WPA project. So that's sort of our pavilion roof. They put the concrete down and all that good stuff. So that's sort of the origin story. And, then they moved around the corner and opened in our current location in 1941. So
wow, that is so
That's amazing. So no tents back then. So if we had been doing a podcast in 1918, we'd just be table talk.
Table talk.
Truck talk.
Truck talk. That's right.
And it's funny because we always are telling market managers, if you're wanting to start a new market in an area, just really make sure that it's something the community wants. Imagine a community wanting a farmer's market for 40 years.
For 40 years, right?
Yeah.
It'd be a hero.
Wow, delayed gratification. Wow.
Exactly. And there's
so
some fun stories from back in the early days that I saw too, where people used to camp out at the market because they wanted to get their prime spots.
Oh.
Or people would be, harvesting by flashlight, and then the one person would be bringing product and then be replenishing it sort of pre-refrigeration throughout the day. So, things have changed a little bit. Just a touch.
Just a little
tad.
bit.
Yeah,
That's so
that's
cool.
amazing.
Yeah.
What a rich local history.
I love that story.
How fun. Well, we better be archiving stuff so
Oh, that's right.
in 100 years from now, people can look at pictures of us at the little Italy Mercato.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? I wonder what they'll be saying. So we're saying, "Wow, no tents." I mean, what will they be saying then? Look at those funny little canvas things. That was a weird thing.
Like when people used to actually eat food
refrigerated
and not
pods?
just take like Soylent Green pills.
Oh,
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
So as of now, you guys are open both Wednesdays and Saturdays. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. So our Saturday market is the one that is year round, but we shift our hours a little bit in the winter. So January through April, we open at 8 instead of 7. But we are always until 3 p.m. And then our Wednesday market runs May through the end of December. So that one's going to be wrapping up December 22nd. And then it goes into winter hibernation for a few months and then comes back the beginning of May. But Saturday is the year-round market.
Yeah, and 7 to 3, that's a really long market. We are 8 to 2, and we're like the longest market around in San Diego.
Yeah, it's long. I mean, I get there at 5. Vendors are already set up by the time I get there sometimes. But yes, it's a very, very long day for certain.
So by the time they set up and then do an 8-hour market and then break down, do you see farmers and vendors that are running like 2 shifts there?
Sometimes I think people do bring in other staff throughout the day, and it really depends on the person. But sometimes it's the people themselves. They're there the entire stretch. I mean, staff's there, 10, 11-hour day on market days. So.
Okay, we need to remember this for when our staff or vendors complain about our 6-hour market.
Like at Art Walk?
Yeah, like Art Walk, yeah.
8 to 4. And it was...
You know what? We know people that do this every week.
Yeah.
Just deal.
So can you just tell us a little bit about, like, I've never been to Ann Arbor, and I haven't been to the Ann Arbor Farmers Market. So, like, what's the market like? What's the area like? It sounds like it's in a historical building, but, like, what's the vibe? Who shops there? Who are your regulars?
So the market is in a neighborhood that's called Carytown, which is sort of doesn't really have any significance other than people know that that's what it's called. It's where Zingerman's, the famous Ann Arbor deli, is located, like across the street from us, basically. But it was actually, previous to that, was a historically Black neighborhood, which a lot of folks don't realize. And that's part of kind of the hidden history, I guess. You could peel back the layers of the area around the market and learn a lot. But, the city of Ann Arbor these days is very diverse internationally in particular. Lots of students, right? It is the home of University of Michigan. So we do have pretty much every age, from child to college student to elder, people that have been telling me they've been shopping at the market their entire lives for 60 years. It is a really, really diverse cross section. We also have lots of international people. We have a lot of people that English is not their first language. For example, we have a lot of Mandarin speakers as well as Russian speakers, which is kind of unique to Southeast Michigan. It's like an Ann Arbor thing. And people are always surprised when they see our food assistance signs on the window, like, what language is this? They're surprised to learn that it's Russian or Mandarin. Yeah. So it's pretty diverse, and it reflects the town. Again, there's also people coming in from out of town constantly because of the university. They do attract a lot of visiting scholars, international students, all sorts of folks. So it's a pretty big cross section. I would say it's pretty vibrant. Our Saturday market is definitely bustling, bordering on, extra crowded, which is something that we were concerned about in the height of the pandemic. How do we keep it safe, knowing that we are so, packed in that you can't be 6 feet away from people. Whereas the Wednesday market is much more of a relaxed feel. It's more of like a community market. You have time to actually stop and talk to folks, whereas not so much on Saturday.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to our Wednesday, Saturday kind of setup. It's in the same location, but different vibes. In the Wednesdays, a slower pace. You have that opportunity to shop with, you don't have to push your way through a crowd, and you can chat with the farmer, and it's a little bit more relaxed.
Yeah, definitely a different vibe. Do you have staffers that speak Russian and Mandarin, and how do you deal with that for your EBT programs and information booth and all that? Do you look for bilingual staffers?
That is my dream. I definitely put it on the job description when we were hiring. But we don't, but that's definitely something I'm looking for. But this summer we had a fantastic volunteer who's originally from China. So she was able to, make some inroads that we were really excited about. And then one of our staff members, she does understand numbers in Mandarin. So at least she can understand that they're saying, 20 or 40, but it's been hard. It's definitely been one of our struggles. I really feel like we should maybe get one of those apps that it translates automatically if you just speak into it. So I've definitely seen a couple customers with those that have been really, really big help. But yeah, it is a stumbling block. But it is something we're constantly looking for more staff or volunteers or people that can help us bridge that gap. I would love to learn as well myself. And maybe I will. We'll see. Maybe that will be good.
That's be kind of a challenge. I mean, you're not talking about learning French. You're talking about learning 2 new languages with completely different alphabets.
Yes.
Exactly. Because if it were Spanish, I've got it personally. I do have it covered, but we don't really have that high of a Spanish-speaking population. Although there are, of course, folks that speak many different languages.
Yeah, it's always good to have someone on staff with different language skills. We have a staffer who can speak Spanish and Italian, so that comes in handy because we do have a lot of Spanish-speaking customers, and then there's just like little old Italian men in the neighborhood that like to come over and chit-chat with us. So she's always like a hit with them. And then one of our staffers does speak Russian. We don't get a lot of Russian customers, but he just...
we can send Art over to help
send
out
them
in
over.
Ann Arbor.
We'll send our staffer to Michigan.
Or we could switch for a day. I speak Italian as well, so that would be...
there we go.
Oh.
We'll have a market manager exchange program.
How fun would that be?
That'd be cool.
This.
I think that's a great idea.
Like
we were just talking with
for market managers.
Yeah, that's right. It'd be great. We were just talking with another group about having a sister market kind of program, like you'd have a sister city thing, but have a market in another area that you talk to. But yeah, I say an exchange program would be even better. We'll send you Art for a while. You send us some other folks. It'd be good. Are most of your vendors year-round there? I know you have a year-round market, which is actually not entirely typical in Michigan, and much of the Midwest because of the weather. But so you guys go year-round. How does the mix of vendors and the size of the market change in the wintertime?
Yeah, so we do have a lot of diehards that are, year-round folks with a lot of their storage crops and stuff like that. But it depends on the person. But some of them, they do take breaks periodically. For example, I had a vendor that they took maybe the last 3 weeks off because they were getting their holiday displays and greenery ready. And now they've come back with sort of less produce, but much more focused on holiday items. Or we have people that come, a lot in the winter and spring, but then in the hot season, they don't really have stuff because they might do microgreens or things that don't like the heat as much. So it kind of rotates in that way. But there are a few of our produce folks that are, I would say, fully year-round, like the people that maybe the apple orchards and people that have the product available. And then in terms of our like food producers, we have a lot more folks that do year-round on that. But it's a good mix still. But I would say maybe our Saturday market in the wintertime becomes very similar to our Wednesday market. So it's much more that community feel, but certainly lots of people still come. And again, I was pretty surprised. Last year was my first year. I was like, really? Are you sure in January people are going to come out? But they were there. They were there every week, or they'd be upset if we skipped a week, but we don't usually skip. But
yeah. So we've really, we talk about it a lot, and we know for sure that if you're consistent about being there, the customers will always come, rain, shine. Year-round, and I guess in your case, snow, sleet. Yeah, but they will come out if you sell it, they will come. Paraphrase the old baseball movie. But you're a producer-only market, is that right?
We are. Yep.
And do you make exceptions to that? Do you have coffee, or you got a guy growing coffee in Michigan, or what's happening there?
Well, for food producers, it's slightly different, right? It's like if they have to be the one that is actually making it themselves. Right. So if they get the beans elsewhere, but they're roasting them and they're creating blends like that counts.
Okay, good. That's kind of our standard too for certain things that you just can't grow in San Diego County. If you can, if somebody in California is growing it, we wouldn't allow a reseller, but we all need coffee, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does Michigan have a certification program for producers, or is it up to the market manager to verify that the folks bringing the produce actually grow it?
It's up to us, and we actually do have a contractor on staff that does site visits. So they go to all of our farms, they go to all of our producers, they go to all of our artisan spaces, and that is every other year they're checked out. So that is somebody that we pay to do that job.
And you have farmers from Michigan and Ohio, is that right?
We have a handful. I would say the vast majority are Michigan, but we do have one or two that do come over the border from Ohio.
And that's a great area to have just a really strong variety of produce and orchards and all the things. Do you see much in the way of dairy and meat and the proteins?
Yep. Yes. We have, I want to say, maybe 7 meat vendors in terms of poultry. We have maybe I want to say 4 dairy vendors that do cheeses and all that stuff.
I'm jealous.
We're very jealous of that. Southern California is a wasteland when it comes to dairy and meat. Every other area of the country that I go to for markets, it's so wonderful to see the varieties of that at the market. But our health requirements here make it very difficult to make cheese or to sell dairy. And then our land cost, we just don't have a lot of people that are grazing animals here, so it's a little bit tricky. We do have some great fresh fish. I'll bet you that we have more sea urchins than you. So
we could trade some fish for some cheese.
Yeah.
When we
we'll
do
try.
the exchange, the person will bring the goods. From the
That's
other
right.
place.
When you do that exchange
Part of the
program,
exchange.
that's right.
Deal. I
Uni
like
for
this.
camembert.
Yes.
I'm on it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Well, we do have some fish as well, but lake fish is not the same, of course, as the ocean diversity. But in terms of the dairy restrictions you talked about, we actually have new restrictions on lake fish that are being caught. So it's been hard for us to keep some of our fish vendors going. We do have one right now, but that's been something that's been hard because, again, being surrounded by water, you would assume that we would have that access, but not much. But that's another unique thing I think people don't realize about Michigan is that we are second most diverse behind California in terms of the products that can be grown and raised in the state. And that's partly because of the Great Lakes creating what they call, the fruit belt, which is sort of a more temperate temperature all the way around the state, mostly on the Lake Michigan side. But hence, that's why, fruit belt area has always been the breadbasket for Chicago and places like that. So maybe folks that are listening in know that, but maybe folks don't.
Many people, I'm sure, do not. And I'm not sure everybody's going to know about Zingerman's, but for me, it's Mecca. So I was very excited to hear that you're across the street from Zingerman's. That's pretty exciting.
I can see
for
them.
Old school foodies.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know that you have a real heart for diversity and trying to make your market more diverse and trying to encourage, newer farmers, BIPOC farmers. Are you taking any real structural steps to change the makeup of your vendors and farmers there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a lot of times we have many rules that are in place, maybe even the producer only, or like just how it was written, that might sort of reproduce inequities. Because again, land access, you mentioned, is a really big problem for diverse farmers of all backgrounds, as well as, beginning farmers and people that might not have land that they're inheriting. So, by having also the volume that we have of being an 8-hour market, there are some things baked into our structure that make it kind of hard for other folks. But the way that I've been sort of targeting most directly is I've been bringing a lot of Black-owned food trucks to the market, and some of because we also have a category of what we call the mobile food vendors. So they're people that aren't necessarily there all year, and they tend to provide more hot prepared food, whether that's a food cart or food truck, or if it's just a vendor that sells spinach pie, for example, like one of our vendors does. That's a way that I've been sort of doing it in the short term because I feel like it's a little bit easier to recruit folks in that framework. But yes, that's definitely my goal. I want our market to reflect more the community that we exist in because, that's sort of the double-edged sword of being such an old market. We do have vendors that have been there for generations. We have a vendor I'm thinking of there. They themselves are they're third generation, their children are fourth generation, and we have maybe 4 or 5 vendors that are that multi-generational thing, which is fantastic, but it also means some people might not feel like there's that much space for newer people. So I've been really trying to, encourage newer folks to come on, especially too, as some of our more veteran vendors get to that retirement age. We really want to keep the market vibrant and keep it going. So yeah, I'm definitely trying to, do the best I can and do the most I can in the middle of a pandemic, of course, to bring on more diverse and younger growers. But in terms of the producer only, there are some spaces for wiggle room. I'm not saying we should not have that because I think that's important. But for example, we have a vendor whose family grows tea in the Kashmir in India. And we also have another person whose family grows olives. So we're like, okay, well, it's still your family's operation. You might not be physically growing it, but that's sort of this gray area that we've opened up. And that's, it's not a solution per se, but it's definitely a way to address both diversity of product and, having more diverse business owners as well. But
that's really interesting.
There's maybe 2 or 3 vendors. It's not very many vendors, but they are sort of a special case.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We're planning to have a big conversation that I think could get lively at this next year's conference about how the rules that we set up that create market integrity are also creating exclusion in some cases, and how we need to kind of get outside of our heads and outside the way things have always been done. I'm curious on so producer-only requirements in certain parts of the country also include the caveat that the farmer has to own the land. I'm just discovering that when I'm talking to a lot of different managers. And that's extremely exclusionary because a lot of times new farmers, and especially Black farmers that have had land taken away in the last couple of generations, are leasing land. And some of these markets are saying, well, no, the rules say you have to own your land. And that definitely closes out a lot of new farmers, a lot of BIPOC farmers. How are your regulations written on that? When you say producer only, does it require land ownership?
It does not.
Good.
Luckily. And, if that was something that it did include, I think we would, be talking about that and removing that, because me as a farmer myself, I don't own the land that I grow on. So that's also deeply personal. Someone who is land insecure myself. But no, that's really interesting. I didn't realize that some producer-friendly markets did have that requirement, because ours is just that you have to grow and or make whatever you're selling yourself. And that's sort of how it is broadly defined.
Really interesting. And this kind of, I wonder if this ever comes up in your Public Market Advisory Commission, which I was reading about on your website. And I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about what role this oversight committee plays in your market.
Yeah, great question. So we're sort of unique, both that we're run by a city parks department and also that we do have this, what we call the Public Market Advisory Commission. And it's an interesting thing because it's made up of 2 vendors, 1 person that lives in the neighborhood, 1 sort of at-large representative, and 1 other just shopper, right? So it's supposed to have both the voice of vendors as well as the voice of customers involved in there. So they're pretty much an advisory role. So they don't really have any, decision-making power per se. But when we are talking about something or trying to vote on something or recommend something that needs city council approval, like a rule change, or we have sort of the transfer of vendor seniority, which is a whole other topic that could probably be its own podcast. But things like that sort of needs city council approval. They help us. They give recommendations. They are also sort of just another voice for customers or vendors or people that might not be able to talk to us market staff directly. It's another place that vendors themselves can show up to the meetings or call in right now, because obviously everything's virtual, and sort of be part of the conversation. So it's pretty unique in that sense. And they are all people that are, I think they get officially appointed by the mayor. And what's interesting is that the market staff, we don't have a role in who gets to be on that, which I actually prefer. I was like, just apply over there, they'll make the decision. Whereas, I don't want to get involved in making it seem like, we're stacking the commission or something, obviously we wouldn't be doing that. But so it's unique in that way as well.
Wow, that sounds so interesting and helpful in some ways, but also kind of sounds scary.
Yeah.
To have input from a shopper and input from different community members. I mean, it's always great to hear what your farmers market community has to say. How do you balance that? Have there been any situations in which you've gotten really harsh criticism or difficult feedback to implement into the way that you operate your market?
Yeah, it's interesting because right now we're in the process of updating our rules to reflect COVID-related changes, right? There used to be a completely different sign-in process where market vendors would be confirming if they were coming for the week or not. It used to be this thing, and this is pre my time there, so I could be completely mischaracterizing this, but vendors that didn't have the same seniority level, because we have 2 different levels. There's the annual vendors that have been there for a very long time, and then we have the daily vendors that are more sort of sporadic or newer. So it used to be that the annual vendors would go into their spots, and then the daily vendors weren't even allowed to come into the parking lot until their spots were assigned at 6:30. Keep in mind that we're a 7 o'clock start on the market. So I'm kind of glad that was one of those things that we were able to change due to COVID, because we couldn't have people congregating. We need to change things so that now what we do is we have a sign in where people just tell me the day before they're coming or not. And they have multiple types of contacts that they can do for that. But we're in the process of making that part of our rules. There's some people on there that have very strong opinions, like, oh, let's go back to what it was before, sort of things, which obviously is not possible, partly because we've been using this system, since we reopened in May 2020. But also it just realistically, doesn't make that much sense. So that, it's a hard process. I was in there like, oh yeah, let's just update this rule change. It's going to be great. Make it easier for me to have something written down where I can say this is the policy. But it's been taking a lot longer than I had anticipated, which is fine. It's just that people have a lot to say about it. So that's sort of where we're at right now. Plus, it's a monthly meeting, so it's also hard to get everybody nailed down in the height of the season, things like that. So
I do want to tell you that you're not alone in this. I'm actually I'm facilitating a meeting later this week with a market up in the Pacific Northwest, because they're just stumped. They have this huge board that's farmers and vendors, and the managers are all on this board, and they've got a huge rift in terms of deciding how to grow their market, because the two guys that have been there for 20 years selling meat don't want any new meat vendors, and they want to grow the market, and they want to offer more choice to their consumers, which will grow the entire market, the traffic to the whole market. Rising tides float all boats, but getting those senior vendors sometimes to understand that a market that's larger, that has more choice and more options, will attract more people. Hard for them to get their heads around that. They just kind of want to hold their spot and hold their standing there. So this is something that we see all over the country. So just so you know, our job is weird everywhere. It's not just you. It's not just you're not the only one that has these intractable folks that just don't want to see changes, that love the way we've always done it.
Yeah. Change is
That's
hard.
the downside of our long legacy, I guess, as a market. It's fantastic, but on the other hand, it's like, well, we've been doing this for 50 years. You're trying to change it? Why would you do this?
Oh yeah, with that older
hard.
market, I can imagine.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's easier with a newer market. You're like, well, we've only been doing this for 6 months. Let's change it.
Yeah. But on the plus side, it's very evident, as somebody that's never been to your market and just read about and heard about it, that your community does really value the Ann Arbor Farmers Market. This is something that's really baked into your community and has support on both a local and individual and municipal level, which is really awesome. And do you have any advice for other market managers that are operating a government-run or a Parks Department-run farmers market?
Yeah, definitely. And you're totally right. We are super fortunate. We have fantastic customers that are not just from the city of Ann Arbor, but all over Southeast Michigan, Ohio. People come from everywhere to visit us. So we're super fortunate that we are kind of basically a community institution. That's how I would describe it at this point. And not only that, we're super lucky that we're in a city that's really in favor of sustainability. I mean, there's an A20 plan to get to be net zero for carbon emissions by 2030. Right? There's a lot of support for green space, local food, local business. So yeah, we're super fortunate in that way. And then also being part of the Parks and Rec department. I mentioned before, we had extra staffing come help us in the beginning of the pandemic. They run over 160 parks just in the city that we're located in. So we have, really great resources there. But I guess I would say is that don't be scared to advocate for everything that you need, because a lot of times, even not us, even in a place where it is super supportive and we're fantastic, we are one of 160 other parks. So sometimes it is hard to get, your direct needs met, but just continually be vocal and put it out there, that these are things that you need to be successful. And that's, at least how we've been doing it over here.
You sound like you're doing a great job. Having come on right in the middle of COVID, and that's a crazy time to start. And sounds like you've made terrific strides, even in the midst of all that. And maybe that's one of those silver linings that when out of chaos, you can sort of slip a few changes in there, or keep a few things that you had to do that actually turned out to be really good ideas. Mm-hmm. Anything else we should have asked you that we didn't?
I would love to talk a little bit about food access.
All right.
Food assistance.
Sure. Yeah. So what kind of food access and food assistance programs are you running at that market?
Yeah, so we actually do the most food assistance sales of any market in our county. And that's primarily we do SNAP and then the Double Up Food Bucks program, which I'm sure you're probably familiar because it's so widespread now, or versions of it. So Fair Food Network is who runs it. And that's actually based in Ann Arbor. So we're very, very fortunate that we are kind of ground zero for that. I can call them up and say, we're running out of tokens, come on over. They can give us technological support for that. We also do the WIC Project Fresh coupon program, as well as the Senior Project Fresh, both of which just ended in our area here a couple weeks ago. And then last year, I was actually approached by a local nonprofit that works with medically stigmatized populations. And we created what we call Community Cash as a way to have people be able to have access to healthy food, but also not be, easily identified by their medical condition, that they would be there at the market. So it's something that we created. They basically bring this card in that also doubles as a recipe card. They bring it to our window, and then we just sort of trade it out for our regular credit card. So that's been something that I was really excited about, bringing in my social worker self into the mix. So I was pretty happy about that. And, Ann Arbor is sort of known as being a more affluent community. So that's something that I was somewhat surprised about, how many people we do have that are utilizing their food assistance with us. And it's something that I think is fantastic, right? Because they can get deals year round. We're one of few markets in the state that are year round, especially year round outdoor. I think maybe just us and Grand Rapids, but it is something that's pretty fortunate. But I'm really happy that we're able to be involved, especially now with the pandemic, whereas the need for food assistance has skyrocketed.
And so many more people now are on EBT programs and SNAP programs that weren't before.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's surprising to a lot of people who's on EBT or who's on SNAP at any given moment. People make assumptions about that aren't necessarily correct. I'd like to ask, just because I was in a conversation this morning about this, did your area get the machines for WIC this year? Did they try to convert it to a system where each farmer would have a machine that they had to use to swipe for WIC benefits as opposed to the paper checks?
Not for WIC, but we're sort of in the process of that for the Double Up Food Bucks. But for our case, since we have so many vendors, it just didn't make sense to give sort of a tablet to everybody, because we have about 120 vendors and we have about 66 of those are farmers. I think it's about 58%. So we were sort of thinking, like, how are we going to do it that we have 66 tablets, or where are they going to be stored and all this stuff? But we're in the process of working with the Fair Food Network to transition that process, at least at our point of sale in our office, to do it that way. But yes, we're in the mix of trying to learn. And it's funny because my staff, I'm like, here's the tablet. This is how you do it. Oh, no, I'm scared. I'm not ready yet. They just sort of like push it over to the side. Like, let's bring it back out. Like, it's fine. We'll get there. But yes, we are currently in the process of technologizing our Double Up Food Bucks, at least.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around. This conversation I was in this morning, they were talking about what an abject failure this program had been that had been imposed on this group of markets in Northern California, because the farmers just didn't want to deal with the technology. Their connectivity was not great in that area because of the rural stuff. And they didn't have a good way, once they got back to the farm, to connect to get those funds transferred to their accounts. And they're very kind of up in arms and just saying, no, I'm not going to take it. I'm not even signing up for WIC next year because of this. So it's interesting. Sometimes technology has definitely improved our lives in many ways, but sometimes you have to kind of dig in and see if it's really going to be an improvement to to those precious tokens and script that all of us
Yeah.
rely on and
Yes.
have to count and carry. Sometimes they work.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point too for some of our older vendors. We also do have a bunch of Amish families that are with us. So, there's like that literal technological barrier, whereas, I can't even call them. Although when they call me, it's always interesting. When they're calling me from their neighbor's phone but there really are barriers for people that just will not use technology, even if you teach them how to utilize it. We have people that don't use email. I'm sure many market managers listening are in the same boat. Some people that you just have to talk to them in person. So yeah, you're right. It's a really big stumbling block. On the one hand, we think technology is going to open up all these opportunities, but on the other hand, are we making things more difficult for our vendors? And is it that much more convenient for really anyone, right? Because it's also more administrative tasks that people need to learn how to do. Yes, it may be easier for tracking, but on the flip side, we worry for us is like, that's a separate transaction almost that you're going to have to do to use the tablet, because you're still already swiping the card for EBT at the one machine, and then you have to do it again, and it's just creating this thing. But on the flip side, the reason, at least for the Double Up Food Bucks with us, is that they're trying to make it transferable to grocery stores. So they're trying to make something that they can take, and we do have the People's Food Co-op in Ann Arbor just around the corner. So there are people that they, swipe their card and then they just go right around the corner and continue their shopping. So, that's important. But you're right. How do we make it so that it works for everybody and that doesn't leave farmers out that just might not have access to technology for whatever reason?
We're round holes, and the government's creating square pegs.
Yeah. We don't want to fit in.
That's right. It's a challenge.
Different.
But thank you for pushing for that. Those Double Up Food Buck programs and all of the food nutrition incentive things are so important. The fact that farmers markets can even do that, is relatively recent. So it's wonderful for the communities, for the managers that make the effort, and understanding there's some cost involved and some extra time to make that happen. You're doing good work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. And also the PEBT program too, with just like the pandemic specific EBT, just having to explain it to people. But no, I think it's great. I want more markets to be able to participate in all food assistance. I think it's a fantastic use, because a lot of times, as we know, farmers market produce is fresher, it's cheaper, it's probably more ecologically sound, is less worker exploitation involved. So it's fantastic across the board, and I would love to see it expanded even more. But we're on the right track, certainly.
That's right. Our fruits and vegetables are not stuck in a container off the port of LA.
That's right. It's right here. And I think that's what the pandemic taught us too, right? Is that you need to have this direct access to food. So
Short supply
and
chains.
Stimulating your own economy,
Yes.
your community's economy. So yeah, just keeping that work going.
It's true. And we've had sort of unprecedented demand ever since then, too. I've had vendors telling me, these are the best season last 2 years that I've ever had. People are coming there because, again, also people feel more safe shopping outside in a pandemic. But yes, we've certainly seen a rejuvenation because, for a while there, last few years, it was kind of, you could get local food at a multiplicity of places, right? It was sort of going away, at least from levels of interest from like 2008 to 2015 time period. And I really think it was interesting that the pandemic rejuvenated that again, saying like, okay, this is why we have to do local. We have to make sure these local businesses keep going. We need to make sure, farmers have their livelihoods intact. And that's been something that I've been really happy to see here specifically, but also I know it's nationwide that's going on.
So another shout out to Silver Linings. Thank you so much, Stefanie, for being with us today and sharing your silver linings. We like to collect those. It makes us feel a little bit better about the last 2 years and going into the next year. Really appreciate you being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Have a good one, Stefanie.
Nice to meet you. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Tent Talk today, and big thanks to MarketLink for helping connect consumers and the farmers markets that feed them by providing the technology and equipment to process SNAP and other payments at markets every week. Find more information by clicking the MarketLink logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Farmers markets are all about connection, and all of us, operators, farmers, and vendors, keep learning. Join us and your fellow market participants at the 6th Annual Intense, the Farmers Market Conference in San Diego, California on March 7th, 8th, and 9th, 2022 to grow your market and your community. Connect with people just like you from various parts of the country and share what's happening in your area in the terrific conversations over in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community. If you're actively involved in a farmers market, please find us there, answer the 3 qualifying questions, and join the group. You can also message us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros or email us at connect@farmersmarketpros.com. If you're just getting started in farmers markets, check out our Vendor 101 online course at farmersmarketpros.com. Thanks for listening to Tent Talk. Please leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you access your podcast, and tell us and others how you're enjoying Tent Talk. If you are listening on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss the next episode. Tent Talk, the Farmers Market Podcast, is proudly produced by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Justine Marzoni-Mead. Original music by David Mead. Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll have another great episode next week. Tune in.